are you coming along? Are you coming along? Are you coming along? Hey, are you coming along? Are you coming along? Are you coming along? Hey, are you coming along? Are you coming along?
It's my great privilege and honor to welcome our strategic partners, our partners, associates and guests to the 2023 All Gathering Momentum of the Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative. This is John North. I'm here in the Garden Route of South Africa, and it's wonderful to see all the various faces, some new, some familiar, joining us for this AGM event. You would have had access to these slides beforehand, but if you need to view them at your own end, I'm going to ask my colleague Marietta just to paste the link to the original slides in the chat. Just some housekeeping before we look at our agenda for today. If you haven't done so yet, please ensure that your first and last name, as well as your affiliation, is shown on your Zoom profile. Also note that the call is being recorded, as we've done the last 4 years, I think. It's very interesting to see that our AGM meetings going back to 2019, 2020 are still being viewed on YouTube as a reference point. We will not record the breakout discussions, of course, and if anything is said during the meeting that you wish us to edit out afterwards, we'll do that before the recording is made available externally. We're going to spend the first part of our AGM on getting us up to speed, which includes an overview of GRLI's why, what, and how, and who, for the benefit of those joining us for the first time. We'll also have a short breakout to connect with each other, reconnect with each other and with the agenda of the GRLI. I'll provide a brief finance update. We'll hear from some of the key governance players in the GRLI, and then we'll move into the future. That will include some updates on various initiatives and ideas that are underway and emerging. And we've proposed a breakout for a collective action that's been in the works for the last year or so, but has a longer history to it, which is around developing a global agenda for responsible management education. As per usual, plenty of time during plenary to provide your input. Also, please do use the chat function that is available. I should say that we are legally required as a foundation for public benefit to have an annual general meeting, but of course we've reinvented it over the years into All Gathering Momentum, which is really an opportunity for us to take care of the GRLI vehicle and our shared journey. I think of it as an opportunity to true the wheels of the bicycle. So where have we been? Where are we now? What lies ahead? And as a reminder, it's not my office, but all of us, all of you, that takes care of the GRLI's work and its direction of travel. Obviously, you won't be able to read this, but coming into this AGM, many of you provided input in terms of a survey that was sent out. And the survey results, of course, are available, has been circulated. Again, I'm just going to ask Marietta to please paste that link into the chat, or anyone who has it open is welcome just to put it into the chat for those of you who want to have a look at the survey results. We've tried to incorporate as much of this into the flow of the agenda, but I think more importantly, this helps direct our work for the coming year and is highly valued and priced. So thank you very much for that. So the GRLI, why, how, what, it really exists to catalyze the development of global responsibility in leadership and practice. We do so as an ongoing and collaborative action-oriented inquiry. So it's a question which is held by a globally engaged network of partners and associates. And we take initiative, as the name says, Globally Responsible Leadership Initiative. We take initiative individually and collectively. We experiment, we learn, we share our learning, not only within, but also beyond the GRLI, and increasingly, as we'll see in today's conversation, playing a role in helping steward the ecosystem of the development of global responsibility, particularly within the responsible management education space. Some of you may remember that in 2019, we started a discussion around what's important now for the GRLI, and we identified 5 pathways of our work. So we don't have a strategic plan that's set in stone. We have a strategic direction, and that strategic direction works across 5 pathways, including stewarding the landscape, which is looking after the ecosystem, our own governance, which is taking care of the vehicle, building the narrative around the development of global responsibility. It's our essential purpose to tell this new story of developing global responsibility. Other pathways around building the relationships that are needed for sustaining change, that's the engagement. And then, of course, discovering new territories and frontiers for the development of global responsibility. So that's around exploration. And of course, that's all publicly available on our website. And we value your input into that. We are currently 23 full institutional partners. We've capped this at a maximum of 30, not to be exclusive, but to keep it relational. Each one of the partners have a seat on our council with voting rights in our governance matters. Not that we ever really vote on anything, but of course it means that you can serve as a guardian or a board member, depending on what the statutes allow, and of course set the direction of travel for the initiative. We also have associate partners, and it's a growing group of institutions that associate with our agenda, many of them here today. And of course, it's a pathway to partnership. And then, of course, a growing number of individuals that associate with the GRLI in their personal capacity. And then we have our foundational founding facilitative strategic partners, which includes AACSB, EFMD, Oikos International, and UN Global Compact, that co-founded us with EFMD in 2003. We also recognize that we exist and operate in a wider ecosystem of organizations and initiatives, and that map of the ecosystem is something that we've been maintaining over the years, and which we're increasingly focusing on. Again, I think maybe if you're interested, please do look at that link. So just in summary, before we move on to finalizing the kind of the business end of the AGM, the GRLI holds the question, what is global responsibility? How do we develop it in how we learn, live, and lead? We're not a member-serving organization. We are driven by our partners. We don't have the answer to the development of global responsibility, but in holding the questions and the inquiries around the development of global responsibility, we experiment, we initiate, we learn, share our learning, and hopefully create a collaborative impact. So with that, very brief getting up to speed session, what we are very much focused on in terms of our guiding principles is ensuring that we innovate in a more relational way, and that we really foster the relationships and the engagement and the trust that is needed amongst our partners, associates, and strategic partners to drive the work. So what we did in the pre-meeting survey is we asked people about the value that they find in engaging with our work. What we wanted to suggest for the opening conversation this morning is just to go into groups of 3 or 4 and to connect with 2 or 3 other people in a small group conversation for 15 to 20 minutes. And the question that we're taking in is, why am I or we partnering or associating with the work of the GRLI? If you're the one reflecting out loud on that, it's for the other 2 or 3 participants to ask you, why is that important to you? And to really delve into that by asking you, once you've responded, again, why is that important to you? And a third time, why is that important to you? So this is really an opportunity to deepen our understanding of why the others are connecting or associating with this work, and to practice some active listening as we listen to the responses. I'm going to open the rooms now, and we'll see you in a few minutes. as per usual, you were most likely cut off mid-sentence, which I apologize for. We're just going to hold a few minutes, depending on what's needed, just to hear if there's anything emerging from this opening check-in round that you feel is useful for all of us to hear. There's no obligation to have feedback from all the groups. And if you would prefer not to say anything right now, but maybe just share it in the chat, whether it's a comment, a reflection, or anything that it's open for you, then please paste that into the chat. I see Peter's got his hand up. Peter, feel free to go ahead.
No, we really had a very fascinating discussion with Alfonso and Anna and Kathy, and lots of good thoughts here, and I just wanted to bring forth a few of them. So there was a lot of appreciation for the GRLI in terms of providing a space for reflection and for the debate, and also a place where you can be yourself. I think that was very beautifully put, and a safe space where we can have all those activities. And there was also a sense that we are moving forward, for example, with the collective agenda in responsible management and leadership. So something that we are doing together. One of the areas of reflection was, if we talk about gathering momentum, are we actually doing something? Or are we just debating, right? How much can we actually do, and what would be the levels, taking it from the very good culture of having a safe space where you can debate and be yourself? What do we do to change the planet in the end? And that's also, I've moved between 3 different academic institutions through the last 6 years, and I was not alone. So there are also other deans who have moved around. And question was, do you stay and try to improve the place you are, or do you move to a place where you can do what you really want? And I think that's also a part of this. How can we act as academic citizens, really, and leaders? I think that would be my very rough and maybe very personal summary of what we discussed. And I would be more than happy if other members of the group would chip in as well. Trying to lower my hand, but yeah.
Thank you very much, Peter. I see there's some comments coming through on the chat as well. Interesting suggestion from Joe Jones that Darija has typed up. And Oti talking around the fragmentation, which I think we are acutely aware of, including what's our philosophy of responsibility.
Yes, I would say.
Yes,
we did have a very good conversation about making good decisions, about learning, and about global responsibility and our responsibility for the generations that follow us.
Thank you very much. We'll continue taking comments in the chat. Is maybe let me just one last check.
I just would say that we talked about similar things that Peter started with, a place of wholeness, trust, all that sort of thing. But all of it's linked to the relational way that we work, and we have worked from the beginning. It's interesting to see how that is kept alive, even though we have been virtual to such a large extent during the last 3.5 years. I think that's quite amazing that it still comes back, that the community that we are in, the relations we develop, and the way we bond with each other, and through that actually make actions possible. We used to work very much with in-person meetings where it was a given, and we had a very special way of relating and working and building all of that for newcomers, etc. But it seems like that foundation And that glue and that key dimension of what we are, that wholeness of it, is still there. And hearing that is just fabulous. So I just want to congratulate you and all of us that we still are GRLI, even though we've been through a period of where we haven't really met in the way we set out as one of the key dimensions of getting things done. That's it.
Thanks, Anders, for adding that. And maybe I'll just add a very brief reflection before we move on. What I'm seeing in terms of a rhythm is that we are all involved in so many different platforms, events, initiatives, etc., that one of the things that we can and would like to get better at is leveraging those to ensure that we retain those connections that we value and that we know helps drive the work. But we're also seeing that in-person gatherings are typically around a very specific purpose, such as the Cohort. We've got one coming up in Stellenbosch in March. I had one last year in Antwerp. And that collaborative initiatives, like the course, for instance, are very much possible in an entirely virtual environment, but absolutely that in-person connection is critical. So we would like, as per usual, just to give our partners and associates a very brief overview of where things stand in terms of the finance, and then of course the governance, which I'll hand over to Peter. And I don't know whether Vanessa's on the call yet. Just in terms of the finance, what you're looking at is our standard format, the interim results in October, what we think we'll end up with this year, what we budgeted is the third column, and then what we'll discuss later today with the board, what we're proposing in terms of a budget for next year. I think the key takeaways here is that, at least in terms of 2023, we're forecasting to end the year more or less as per the budget. There were some areas where costs were slightly higher than we anticipated, like the travel, events, accommodation. We did not grow in terms of full partners this year, so this is perhaps a good time to remind the associate partners that are thinking of stepping up to becoming partners that there are currently 2 spots open at least at the full partner level for business schools, and of course 5 spots open for entities that other than business schools. And what we're proposing for next year is a steady state budget, not touching the partner or associate fees. And if there are any kind of questions, suggestions, or ideas for fundraising, feel free to let us know also via the chat. This is what we're taking into the board later today, where I'm sure it'll perhaps receive a little bit more scrutiny.
Actually, to the budget and to the partner fees, you can mention what the fees are, so everybody knows what they would.
Okay, yes. Okay. So the fees are staying the same as they were this year. So our full partner fees, once discounted, comes to 4,000 euros per annum. Our associate partners, for those that are active, like many of you on here, at 2,000 euros per annum. It's a reminder also that it's not just one individual per entity that can engage in the work of the GRLI. So we encourage our partners to nominate up to 20 people, and I know some have done that. For instance, I know Monash has nominated, I think, 20 people that are connected to the GRLI in some form or another. Associate partners, 10 individuals. And then, of course, our strategic partners that are foundational to the GRLI, EFMD and AACSB, are each contributing 15,000 euros per annum, which is shown in the budget there. Yeah, those are the fees for individual associates. This is a guideline, but it's typically 200 euros per annum, which we collect as a donation. And I see there's some constructive comments in there. I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer you straight away, Pierre, but I think if we had 50% additional budget, my immediate take on that would be that there's a lot of work to be done beyond the borders of the GRLI to better align the ecosystem and to create collective impact across the various initiatives. And we are uniquely positioned, I believe, with the support from our strategic partners and, of course, our partners to do that work. We've already had discussions with the Guardians about this. And we do know that this is something that can very easily become bigger even than the GRLI, if I can say so.
Do that mean, John, do that mean, John, that, for example, you will hire additional colleagues in order to spread out the good ideas of GRLI? What will you do in order to be more influential?
Yeah, so the two things that we're looking at, Pierre, and both of them are featuring during the second half of our conversation today. The one is that we're looking at some sort of activation gateway on a regional basis. And Woxsen University has come up with a proposal that we're exploring around establishing not necessarily head offices or anything like that in a top-down way, but more gateways at a regional basis to turn the GRLI inside out and to make it more accessible per region. And then the other would be this global agenda, which we're going to be discussing in more detail later today, which which very well may end up becoming a kind of a macro version of the GRLI itself. But I don't want to preempt that conversation, but it's a really good prompt. Thank you, Pierre, around what we would do with an additional 50% of budget. I think it would go towards the ecosystem. Certainly this office of the GRLI, in my view, and this is the assumption we've been working on over the last number of years, is not really meant to grow. We don't want to grow the central team that much. We would much rather create capacity elsewhere in the landscape to spread and scale the work of the GRLI. Okay, so Peter, I'm going to hand over to you, and I don't know where you would like to start, whether you would like a slide up. Can everyone see the slide?
Maybe the previous slide first, and because
okay, absolutely.
Thank you very much, John. And first, in terms of acknowledgements, I first have to acknowledge this. This is my first AGM of GRLI, so I've not been at previous AGMs, and it felt a little bit unsafe for me. So I had a discussion with John the other day, and that's reassured me that we're having a really good organization. And key to that is, of course, John North. So he is. Yeah, you're shaking your head, and I'm not sure you like the appraisal. I'm probably going to do it a couple of times today, so you better get used to it. But it is really important work you're doing, and without you, we wouldn't be anywhere. First, I want to acknowledge that, and there are so many things I could praise. I will do that later in the sessions. But really, John, for me as a new chair of GRLI, I think you epitomize the GRLI in many ways, and thank you for that, and thank you for taking me through also in the preparation here. And then I also want to acknowledge, before we move to the next slide, Claire Maxwell, who was until this summer was the chair of GRLI and has also left the not entirely left, but certainly the chairship to me of a very good organization. So thanks, Claire, for that. And then maybe go to the new board members and the next slide. We have, and I think that's also hard work on the part of John and others, been able to recruit the new members of the board. And Lily B is the new chair and president and CEO of AACSB International, and she has joined us. She will be seconded by Stephanie Bryant, who is also taking an active role, also in a situation where Lily is still getting to understand the organization and traveling around the world to understand AACSB. Also, a warm welcome to Stephanie. And I don't think Stephanie is here today, right? Steph is not meeting. At least I couldn't see her.
She may dial in a little bit later because she's just traveling back from Rome. So she did tentatively accept this, and we'll see her in the board meeting later today.
Yeah. And of course, then I already had the great pleasure of meeting Alphonse early in the meeting today, because we ended up in the same breakout room. But a warm welcome to, as Director of Quality Services and EQUIS of the European Foundation for Management Development. It's the second of our founding partners, I think, and really great to have you on board, I think, Alphonse.
My pleasure.
And Alphonse, do you want to say something?
No, I just said my pleasure. I knew GRLI from some time ago, and I was also working with the former chair and John, etc. So when Matthew came to me, and it took him like 5 seconds to persuade me to join in. So
it's great. And maybe you want to repeat the thing you said about the vocational conviction that you had about GRLI in our private chat. I'm sorry about.
Oh, I'm not good. I'm not very good at quoting myself. But what I try to say basically is that I'm very pleased to be here for 2 reasons. One is that on an organizational role, I think that we can actually amplify and become a loudspeaker for many of the discussions that take place within GRLI. That's one thing. But on the other hand, and probably more importantly, is that I've always been very supportive of anything that actually has to do with improving the quality of life and using management education as a platform. And I think it was a member of our group when she was pointing out that we have an immense amount of power, let's say, to persuade people, to persuade young people actually to do the right kind of things. And in this way, I think we have to use that possibility. Yeah.
Indeed, most of our impact goes through the students that we send out in the real world, or the graduates, I should say. Thank you, Alphonse. And I saw Amanda Gudmundsson, who's Executive Dean at QET Business School, somewhere in the list, and I have to page down. And Amanda, warm welcome to you. It's also great to have Australia represented in the board. Do you want to say a few words, Amanda?
Thanks so much, Peter. Hi, everyone. Yes, look, I'm really pleased to be a new member of the board. Of course, QUT has been long associated with the GRLI, and very excited about the work that we've all been doing together over many years. And I'm pleased to continue to help steward that in my part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And Hanna-Lena, I think you're also there. You're the Dean of Jyväskylä University Business School, School of Business and Economics, sorry. Are you here?
Yes.
There you go. Do you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Peter. Just briefly, my pleasure really to be part of this and now in a new role as a board member. I have a lot of respect for the work that GRLI has been doing through the years, and happy to contribute on my part.
Great to have you on board.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think maybe I'd suggest a few words that I already, repeating myself, I may be good at that actually, Alphonse. Just to why am I part of the GRLI and now chairing it? I think for me it is the purpose of my professional life to have positive impact through academic activities. And I've been dean now at 3 different business schools: Copenhagen Business School, Maastricht University School of Business and Economics, and most recently and now current at the University of Southern Denmark. And I really think we can do a lot through our academic activities, especially through our graduates, but also through the research and other impact activities that we have. In addition, I'm working as the chair of the Danish Council on Climate Change and give active policy advice to the Danish government and parliament, but also through international networks to the European Commission and generally internationally. And I'm going to COP28 in a few days, 2 days to be exact. And at some point, I'd like to have a courageous conversation with you guys on whether we should invest in the Conference of Parties, but that would be for later. For now, I think that's what I wanted to say, and I think we should ask Vanessa maybe to take the point of view of the Guardians.
Hi everyone. I can't see how many Guardians are there, but if you are a Guardian, if you just put your hand up so everyone can see, because I'm the chair of the Guardians, and I suppose my role alongside the fellow Guardians is to take a governance role in modelling the principles and values within all the approaches. So just going to give a very brief update on what our focus has been over the last year. So I suppose we are, first of all, living with the realities of a more geographically diverse group. That was a conscious choice that we made a few years ago. So we've been shifting some of our rhythms and how we work and trying to sustain the group connection, but also building the individual connections with each other in the work that we're doing through a new rhythm of working. We're a peer group to John, so we're a place for John to land his thoughts and thinking. And particularly this year, it's been about exploring some of the concepts that are going to be discussed later today, but particularly the implications and considerations from a principles and values perspective around the collective agenda, the impact and the role that we play in that. We also remain a place where we're gathered together, so from being scattered across various initiatives, and a place to reconnect and renew. And I've always valued that, the kind of conversation and the stimulus. And somebody said the wellspring that you can tap into, heard that in my check-in this morning from Sheila. So that feels exactly what we've been doing this year. And then there's been a number of areas where we've been advocating in our own areas on the work that we're doing, both in our roles outside of the GRLI, but how the GRLI supports that. So I've been involved in a few specific pieces of work where we've been representing the GRLI and Guardians and just creating more space for conversation in new networks and forums. I would suggest that really next year, a focus for us is aligning our call for the next phase of Guardians with the bigger piece around the collective agenda and what that needs to look like. So again, a bit of a teaser there in terms of what we're talking about next, but what will the role of the Guardians need to be in that phase? And how do we keep alive the ways of working that make that possible? So yeah, and another year of, we only meet 4 times a year. It's not a lot of time. But when we do meet, it's about creating as much impact as we can, and that's spreading into the work that we do in the spaces in between. That's me.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. And thank you also to all the Guardians that are on the call that play such an important role in stewarding the work of GRLI and protecting the ethos and the ways of working. So without any further ado, we've got a number of initiative and updates, ideas and proposals that are on the table. You'll bear with me as we perhaps jump around a little bit in terms of the original sequence. I see Matthew is not on the call yet, and I know you wanted to try and join. So I'm just going to skip that one for the moment so that when he joins, he can perhaps just give us that update on the RRBM work. So what I wanted to propose is you should be able to screen share. I'm going to ask that JC, if you're ready, maybe just to start, we've got I think quite a quick succession of updates. So maybe starting with JC, then after you, we'll go to put the slide on, and then Greg and John, I know you've got a slightly more immersive update and preview, so we'll go to you after that, and then we'll take it from there. Thanks, JC.
Thank you so much, John. So today I won't talk about SUNY test and task, which is quite surprising, but even if I believe that you all should use task in your own university, but it's another topic. So today I really want to to focus on a project that we're going to launch, which is an international survey. And we want to launch that, of course, with GRLI. You are the first network that I present that, but I want to bring other networks because we want to spread that massively. After this call, I will suggest to those networks, if you have ideas of other people who can be interested, don't hesitate. In every single GRLI meeting, we always discuss about faculty. And of course, faculty should be the solution, but sometimes faculty can be the problem. And just, again, a small bracket with task, we compare the score and we realize that, for instance, some of the faculty have a lower level of knowledge than our bachelor students. If you don't do anything on that, it's going to be a little bit challenging. Having said that, one of the big mistakes I've seen when I was in my previous job, it's that as soon as we talk about faculty training, we say, okay, let's do something. And the only way how we split the group of faculty is by discipline. Let's do something, a session, a special day on whatever for faculty in finance or in marketing or whatever. And I think it's a huge mistake, even if it's relevant, but it's not enough. So a couple of weeks ago, we published a short article in the EFMD where we try to understand, when we are talking about faculty, who are the faculty? What is this kind of strange group of people? So we discovered that we have, roughly speaking, 3 types of faculty. On the bottom, we have the people who actually are the most noisy people that you can find in a university, and the people will take lots of your energy. They're anti, they are against. So you can try everything. So they can be deniers, climate change doesn't exist, gender discrimination doesn't exist, whatever. But they could be denier, or there is a small subgroup on that, which are the people which say, I'm a well-known faculty, not researcher, so no one has to tell me what I should add in my course or what I should learn. On the opposite of that, so don't spend any time on that. On the opposite, we have what we call the activists, and we have 3 subgroups. The first one is the systemic expert. I'm one of them. I'm not an expert in one specific topic. Most of you are better in climate change, gender, poverty, whatever, than myself, but I have a systemic vision. I understand the link, etc., etc. Then we have what we call the topical specialist. Is the, for instance, at Cage, in my previous school, we had 10 years ago, one of our faculty in finance decide to jump into climate change. So it's one of the experts in climate change and finance. So he's well known, etc., etc. But as soon as he go outside of climate change, he doesn't know anything. Then you have the third group, really interesting group, which are the new enthusiasts. People who discover 2 or 3 years ago that climate change exists. They jump on the topic. They learn so much in a couple months that they believe that they know everything. And the problem is those are the people that when you assess their level, they have a really poor level. They don't even know that they don't know. Of course, it's better than a couple of months ago, but it's really not at the right level. And last but not least, we have the majority of the people who actually probably have changed many things in their own life in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, but rather they don't see the link between what they teach and the big challenge, marketing and overconsumption, finance and supply, whatever, or supply chain and social dumping. Or when they discover that, they don't know what to do. They really are totally lost. So we are going to use that, and we are launching a global survey to, first of all, confirm and challenge the different typology that we describe, to try to have a better idea, because from my own perception is we have 10% of the people against, we have 20% of the activists, and then 70 in the middle. But we want to see if it's the same. I'm going quick, sorry. So we're going to do that, okay? And then the timeline, we are fine-tuning the survey in the beginning of the year, okay? The idea is rather to bring something for the EFMD conference in June or at the high-level political forum, because we are here in New York. So it could be the moment where we share that. One thing is to understand for those populations, what are the best way to train at the different level. And the call for action, and I finish. You're welcome to spread that if you believe that there are networks that can be interesting to use this. And okay, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, JC. Okay, let's move. Please do add suggestions and chats in the chat. And JC, please add your contact details there just for everyone. I see there's already some constructive input there from Nick. I'm going to suggest that we move on to, I think Matthew's just joined us. Matthew, are you ready just to give us a very brief RRBM update? And then I'll put it on the screen and then we can get back to our order. Matthew? Oh, let me just check if Matthew's... No, okay, I think Matthew's still busy logging on. I'm going to come back to that. Pavana?
No, that's sorry, John. I apologize.
Sorry, we're on mute. Okay, now then we'll go back.
Yeah.
There we go. Thanks, Matthew.
Hi, everyone, and nice to see a lot of friendly faces. Apologies, I was a little bit late. Yeah, just to give you a quick update on RRBM, which is a responsible research in business and management. Again, we a community growing from about 8 years ago, and Sui, who was the president of the AON, wrote a very telling article about the publish and perish, the sustainable models, journals, academic credibility, etc. And it is gaining momentum. We have a Dare to Care scholarships for PhD programs. We have the Responsible Research Awards. The next two summits are, one's being hosted by Judge and then the other's in Cornell, so the double C's. The chair of RRBM is Andrew Caroli, who is the dean at Cornell. And we really are trying to have more impetus into research that has value for society, but also trying to talk to the journals, trying to talk to deans, trying to look at the academic committees for promotion, etc. And if you think about it, the business model of journals is pretty corrupt because it's often public money. You find scholars, then go and do all the work. You submit it to a journal, and then your school has to buy it back. It's immoral. And even open access now is a cartel because they say, of course, we'll do open access, but it's a minimum 6,000 to 8,000 per publication. And young PhDs in the system, and a couple have commented and said, I would absolutely love to work on responsible research, to look at the changing dynamic of the research I'm doing, but I'm sorry, it won't get me a job and I won't be hired. So it's ongoing. There's a lot of good people involved. We've got around 2,000 endorsers. GRLI's always been very supportive and been at the summits. But yeah, there is a newsletter. People can endorse the position paper. And in 2025, it will be 10 years. And I think we are making slow steps, but it's a very worthwhile cause. And if anyone has any questions, just email me. I have some great background information. I have a timeline. I've got Anne's articles. I'd be happy to share with them. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Matthew, for sharing that. And Matthew's details are there on the slide. And we do encourage you, just as we move on to the next slide, just a brief reflection. Pavana, I'm just teeing up your slide, but Matthew, I saw recently how, and an initiative that was catalyzed 10 years ago. In fact, at ESSEC Business School, we met with Polly Higgins, for those of you who were part of that, and her campaign around ensuring that ecocide is declared a crime against peace is starting to pay off in Europe. So sometimes these systemic shifts take a very long time, and it's wonderful to see RRBM continuing to grow. Pavana, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I'll be very brief, of course, as I was mentioned. Yeah, Woxsen proposed to establish GRLI APAC campus in Woxsen campus, Woxsen University premises. So it's just an office that we would keep it open for GRLI associate partners who could work on the ground and make sure that we would be opening gates for the APAC region. We would make sure that the GRLI would connect with multiple local institutions as well who need to be aware of sustainability on the whole. So GRLI, we know that we are advocating for sustainability, but we need to make sure that word spreads. And it's not only for the Indian institutions, but how do we make sure that it is going through Asia and Pacific regions? So our target was majorly India, to make sure that our local institutions would be aware of GRLI working activities, initiatives, and everything. And in the process, we also wanted to ensure that our students would be sensitized on an individual level. So we, as a collective group, we are contributing, but at the same time, if our students are not sensitized and they're just doing for the sake of doing it, there is no purpose of it. So ultimately, the APAC campus that we propose is to have GRLI access to the other institutions here, so that they can have, if not associate partners, it could be just the ones who are in some or the other form contributing towards advocacy for sustainability. So we recently started with a collaborative course, but there are many more initiatives as part of GRLI. We are not really aware, we don't know how to get into it. We don't know how to really work with GRLI on a ground level. So that is why the entire idea of APAC campus was proposed. So I think it's just that we give you the regional reach, because it's a strategic position in Hyderabad is the tech hub, actually, but we don't know what the sustainability is. We don't know how to use that. So we thought we will give that access to GRLI, be it partners, be it the governance body members, anyone, and of course sensitizing our students and the local experts. So this is more or less what we propose to GRLI. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much, Pavana, and also to your team, Rahul and Shahad and Professor Kokoli, etc. As you pointed out, Woxsen's already joining the collaborative course as well. And really, where I think this concept plays to is turning the GRLI inside out, finding ways of not scaling the GRLI entity itself, but finding ways of scaling its work through some sort of activation gateway on a regional level. So this is very much, I think, a pilot. Any suggestions and constructive comments and advice will be very much appreciated. We'll continue to work with Pavana and the team at Woxsen to figure this out. But ultimately, I think the idea would be to ensure that we find a model that can work in other parts as well. If anyone else is interested in helping us think about this, please do not hesitate to step up. So thank you very much, Pavana, for that. Then, so I'm just checking the chat. Okay, I'm going to hand over. Sorry, I know that I think we've got John Knights and Greg. Are you teed up? Are you ready? And can you try and keep it as brief as possible. I know you've got quite a bit that you'd like to cover. We're looking forward to hearing from you, and then we'll move on to the courageous conversations.
Yeah, sure. Can we share screen? Can you?
Yeah, you should be able to. Let me just see. If you're not, share screen. You should be able to share screen. Yeah, there you go.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, over to you, John.
Okay. The challenge is, how do we develop the best leaders to deal with the future? And I'm, first of all, just to introduce myself, I'm John Knights, Chairman of Leadership Global. I know quite a few of you now. But this brief session is to introduce, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this brief session is to introduce our idea for a collaboratory. Can we have the next slide, Greg? Thank you. And to get your initial thoughts. Thank you, John North, for your support and encouragement in this. What we believe is that we need a new mental model of leadership for the future that goes beyond current practice. And as we saw, this is very relevant for all 5 of the GRLI pathways that was mentioned earlier. And we believe that an excellent route to lead. And we want to develop the work we've been doing over the last 20 years towards this goal by collaborating with GRLI partners to co-develop the best offerings to students in terms of content and delivery. I'll come back to that, but let me now pass over to Greg, who's going to give you his thoughts. And Greg, by the way, is the Chief Executive of Leadership Global. Give his thoughts on this new mental model. Over to you, Greg.
Okay, thank you, John. So I'll be brief, as John requested. So we all know that we're in the midst of a whole heap of 20th century disruptors listed here. I think that the key one that we weren't expecting was COVID-19, and that brought into or exacerbated the effects of many of the previous ones. And now we're into routine hybrid working, but what's emerging out of this is a whole host of mental health issues. One of the things that was recognized as a result of COVID was requiring a significant change to how businesses think about the future. And the feedback that we've had from our partners around the world, ranging from the States to India to Africa, is that we're losing the Gen Zs and we're losing the millennials. They've got very different thresholds of whether they stay with the job, what their motivators are, and all of that sort of stuff. And part of the key challenge is the middle leaders, middle management, finding it very hard to work with Gen Zs. But we can't expect the Gen Zs and millennials to shift. It's about actually enabling the middle leaders to make that shift themselves. So in terms of leadership mental models, our default when we think of organizations, these sorts of organograms, where you've got the chief at the top, the chief executive or whatever, you've got the executives and you've got the various departments, and we think how that works, think that's the way that everything works. It's not. It operates like this. And in actual fact, although this is I'm not expecting you to read, this is a healthcare model. You don't even see the chief exec or the executives on there. It's about free flowing and around systems and complex adaptive systems. And what we know about leadership shifts in complex adaptive systems is that actually the context has changed further than we realize it has. Our increase in knowledge is combined with an increase in volatility. And the assumptions of the people at the top, the executive, are increasingly colliding with the realities experienced by people at the front line. And what we also realize is that the context within leaders operate is increasingly more complex. I think Otti, in one of his notes, talked about fragmentation. Actually, we also know that the bigger the organization, the more power becomes atomized. So formal rules count, but not as much as those in authority think. So we need a new mental model, if you like, of leadership. The traditional one that we've come across is what I portray here on the left, the herd of elephants. I like the herd of elephants because it's led by a matriarch, but there's enormous investment put into every baby elephant. The gestation period of an African elephant is 22 months, and there's enormous investment in the survivability of that herd. And the matriarch is responsible for keeping the other elephants in line, for moving from one direction or from one water hole to the next. It's a very familiar model of leadership. But in complex adaptive systems, we don't see the leader. It's still all around survival, but it's a very different model of how you preserve survival, and the agents within those systems follow simple rules. There's a clear purpose, and that sometimes contradicts the previous model of leadership. The fact is not an either or, but it's a both and. We also know, and bearing in mind that slide I showed that 68% of C-suite were saying that there needs to be a transformation in a post-COVID world, we also know that 60% of the ideas for transformation come from the front line in an organization. So you need to be able to enable the kind of culture which gives agency to those people at the front line. And this is something I think intellectually we get, but in practice, I'm not sure that management are really following that. So you may be familiar with this concept of the transpersonal leader. To be absolutely frank, you can't be an effective leader in complex adaptive systems if your ego gets in the way. So the transpersonal leader here is the sweet spot between having that rational intelligence with an evolved and developed emotional intelligence, but with a clear understanding of one's values, one's morals, what the greater good is, and being able to set that aside. So the question here for us is, how can we best equip current and future leaders, together with those they lead, to thrive in this increasingly complex world? I'm going to hand back to you now, John.
Okay, so I don't know, John North, if we have any time for input or questions. We'd welcome them if we have.
Sure. So maybe I'll just, so we are a little bit short on time, unfortunately, but I think maybe it'd be good to just share, John, what you're planning to do next year in terms of a deep dive.
Okay.
So that because I think we've got a flavor of where this is situated. So maybe you can just share a little bit on that.
Okay. The idea is that we will have start off with we will conduct a collaboratory, and that the next step we've penciled in the 14th of February for a 90-minute session for anybody who would be interested in participating with us, just as a first session to see where we go and how we might do this. And it's really just to, as a first step, to further ideas and get input and to formulate mechanisms for collaboration, etc. So if you're interested and you put that in your diary, there will be more information coming via GRLI so that you will know more about it, but we'll be promoting it. But this is just the first promotion of the idea, if you like, to get people thinking as to whether they would like to participate.
Wonderful, and thank you very much, John and Greg. I'm sure there will be interest in this question. I'm just looking at the chat to see whether there are any immediate comments or suggestions around this, but we will definitely promote this. I look forward to what comes out of that. I see Darija is saying that a similar question is being held with the Conscious Leadership Initiative, LEAP. So it's good to already start making the connections there. And JC wants to know the exact time. I don't think we've announced that yet. So
it'll probably be around midday UK, midday Europe, that sort of time, I should imagine.
Yeah.
Fit in with everybody as well as possible.
One of the things that we would like to do for next year, and that will go out as part of the post-event survey, is get a snapshot from each of you and your institutions in terms of what platforms and events next year as potential collaborating opportunities for other partners and associates, so that we can publish a central calendar like we've tried to do this year, by the way, but it's a little bit difficult when my office tries to gather everything from around the landscape. So what we're going to ask you to do is to give us a snapshot of maybe the 3 or 4 key things happening in your context next year where you think other partners and associates may be able to meet up with you to act as stewards for our work. So then let's move on. I just want to quickly share my screen again. Courageous conversations. Chris, if you, I don't think Lana's on the call, but Chris, if you could maybe just give us a quick update on this.
Oh, thanks, John. Yeah, apologies from Lana. She can't be here. She's in the middle of treatment for a cancer that's recurring, but she would have loved to have been here. So just quickly on Courageous Conversations. So we're heading into our 3rd or 4th set of conversations in 2024. And what we've done in the past is to have 4 conversations each year, and we're planning that again for this coming year. And this is where GRLI partners and associates can join with people outside the network to explore the kinds of issues that are challenging or a taboo or that don't have ready answers. Hence the title, Courageous Conversations. So we've covered topics like societal and environmental collapse, topics like greenwashing, degrowth and economic growth and the possibility of degrowth, and also the topic of decolonization, decolonizing the business school. And so we're trying to pick the things that are the taboos or that are dilemmas that you have, that you don't have ready answers to, the kinds of things that are coming up in your practice. So we'd like to just harvest ideas for that today. So my invitation is to just drop into the chat anything that that comes to you that you feel like it would be good for us to discuss. So again, just the 3 areas that feel fruitful are a topic that would be taboo within business schools, a topic that we need to start discussing but we haven't started discussing yet. An example of that might be the degrowth topic, for example. So most of business school curriculum is based on the economics of infinite growth. And so we had a really useful discussion about whether there are other ways to think of that. So it might be something that's taboo. It might be a question, the one that John's just introduced for us. We could run a courageous conversation on that. Is leadership dead? Has leadership had its day? Does it need to be replaced with something else? So these kinds of things that are juicy and have no immediate answers. And what we attempt to do in the conversation, just to give you very quickly the format, so we attempt to bring in 3 different perspectives. So usually a perspective from within the business school world. And then Lana and I have been working really hard to get in voices that don't usually get heard in the debate, and especially voices from the global south. So this is where we're trying to bring in more radical, less heard views, perhaps some counterintuitive views or countercultural views, so that we're getting a nice, healthy discussion. So again, we'll try and do that. And the format is to hear from those conversation starters. Then we have plenty of time in breakout groups for you to explore the issues and how they might apply to your own situation. And then we come back for a plenary discussion just to wrap things up. Yes, all suggestions of taboo topics and courageous conversations gratefully received, and we'll set up 4 conversations for 2024.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I see there are already some constructive suggestions coming in, including some discussion around the framing of the courageous conversations. Oti has kindly added some of the comments that we've received via the survey. So we're certainly taking those into account. And just very briefly, Oti, regarding the framing, I would agree. Many of us are very comfortable and safe. Doesn't necessarily require much courage to jump onto a Zoom call, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are several people joining throughout the year that are not in a similar situation. And I'm just off the top of my head, we've had a number of people join from the Philippines, from Ukraine, from parts of Africa, that are severely challenged in terms of their circumstances, whether social or environmental. And then, of course, some of the conversation starters as well, I think have shown real courage in standing up and speaking in front of what's often a largely academic crowd. So but it's a very good point that's been made there. The conversation starters are typically meant to reflect out loud, to open without a scripted talk. It's not a presentation. And perhaps engage in conversation with someone who possibly holds an opposing view to them. So we're certainly going to continue testing the format and the topics themselves. We have thought about whether we should perhaps reframe this as crucial conversations, because they exist at the crossroad or the crux of our inquiry. That's definitely being taken on board. And any constructive, sorry, Oti, I know, yes, that was Rumina's comment, not yours. You're just the one who kindly highlighted it, so thank you. Thank you very much to Chris and to Lana and to all the conversation starters. I should just quickly add also, we did set aside a small budget to support the facilitation, and in particular some of the conversation starters who were kind enough to provide some of their time and input, and we're now receiving really small invoices that goes towards causes of their choice. So I think we are going to be planting 100 trees as a result of one of the conversation starters, small stipend, etc., etc. Just so you know that there's a knock-on effect to these conversations. Okay, so I'm going to, okay, we don't need to go through that right now. I'm going to provide this update because Jeff, who would normally do this update, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. So I'm just going to say that the collaborative course ran again this year from March to May. In this round, there were still live sessions, but we're looking next year at running this entirely asynchronously. All the material and recordings of the 2023 intake is available to our partners and associates. If you want to log into the Google Classroom and see the actual sessions and material, contact the office of the GRLI. You're more than welcome to look at that. The learning, and I think I've also said this to some other networks, the learning of the GRLI around hosting and presenting a collaborative course is for the benefit of the wider ecosystem. So looking ahead to next year, we're running this again from mid-February to early May. Woxsen and Stellenbosch Business School have both joined. The format this time will be completely asynchronous. There will be 8 modules that will be compulsory, with the global teams project being the culmination of the course. And yeah, absolutely. We encourage other partners and associates that want to do something similar, or that wants to maybe put up their hand for joining us at a later stage, to do so. If you want to find out more about the course, you're welcome to direct your students. Anyone is able to apply to join the course, and We're going to close expressions of interest on the 29th of January, and then students register via one of the 8 institutions for placement, and then we kick off the actual modules in February. It's very prominent on our website. If you haven't looked at it yet, please do support this initiative. I must just a very brief personal reflection. This is something which seems to have a level of momentum and which requires operational capacity. I think we'll probably take a checkpoint next year to see whether it makes sense for the GRI office to continue supporting this, or whether we perhaps find some way of scaling and supporting this beyond the small office that we maintain here. But for the time being, we're very much supportive of this and learning a lot from it. I'm going to hand over to Anna. Are you still on the call? Just
yes,
around
thank you, John.
platform 2. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Hello, everyone. So some brief words about some initiatives. So at the HK Business School, we hosted in September the RMER conference, Responsible Management Education and Research Conference, connected to Prime Working Group on Poverty and DAG chapter. We also hosted a Prime Champions meeting with workshops and a learning journey. Those were 4 days full of activities, workshops, sessions, social and cultural moments, as you can imagine, all around the topics of responsible management, specifically climate change, AI, the relationship between business and academia. Those were the 3 key topics in the keynote speakers. We got together with around 130 delegates from 22 nationalities. I see at least, besides Marie-Jean, of course, who is our dean and hosted the conference, I see at least one more face that was with us last September. And you have more information in the webpage if you would like to learn more about it. So it was very important for us to host this conference and to continue this discussion. I also met Romina at the conference, which was really nice. And again, relating to the point that John was making earlier, we should try to explore, that's a suggestion, to explore more the moments where you convene for other networks so that we can come together as well. Next, the Impact Working Group. It's a late start, and sorry for that, but off we go. We're ready to move on. So in the last team's cohort in Antwerp, we came across some challenges, and one of them is the measuring impact. So at the time, HK Business School, Sassen, and Antwerp Management School, we convened that we would like to have an initial discussion on this topic to make sure that we can move on with the working group. Later, TS also showed some interest to join. And here is an open call as well for those who'd like to join the working group, who will be ready to start as we speak. The idea is that we recognize there is a large array of tools and frameworks to measure impact in business schools, both quantitative and qualitative indicators. But it's difficult to navigate in all these different approaches. So what we'd like to do is not to create another framework, but rather to gain a sense of what is there, take stock, have a benchmark, then define what are the different areas of impact, and try to, as we dig into the different frameworks, to try to find a way of harmonizing them in seeing which are the critical aspects that we'd like to explore, that any business school could explore in terms of impact measurement, and what are other areas that schools could explore as well, but they are not so key, so crucial. And of course, the idea is to make the link with existing frameworks again. So if you explore this aspect, you'll be aligned with this framework, this framework BSIS, for instance, or other measuring impact measurement frameworks. So that's the idea. So we also started an initial conversation with the publisher, and I saw Jo in the call, but I don't see her.
She's had to duck out. Yeah, she's had to duck out, but Emerald is, yeah.
Okay. An initial conversation with the publisher for a potential outlet if something comes out of this group. So if you have any suggestion or if you'd like to join the working group, please reach out to me. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, Anna. And also well done to Ishte for helping connect the dots in the landscape with hosting that particular conference. I'm going to turn over to Armand. Armand, I don't know if you just want to say a few words about what's coming up at the next Deans and Directors Cohort.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. John, you can hear me fine?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be out of that COVID cycle of having to sit in 2 meetings and have divided attention, but it's our last academic forum meeting. So colleagues, just a little bit, we're looking forward to hosting those of you who are coming to Cape Town, South Africa. It is really going to be, I think, an experience to really be part of. We've learned quite a bit from the last Dean's cohort, and the idea for us is really to show you how it is that a business school can move from symbols of inequality to beacon of hope. It's a wonderful university with a deep history steeped in apartheid, and so there's a nice little backdrop there, and there are many good things that have come subsequent to our democracy that we're hoping to share with you, some of which will be in the town of Stellenbosch, and so into the winelands you go, and some of it will be onto the Cape Flats. So the representation on the picture you can see there is really to show you the divides, but also to show you how it is that we as a business school have contributed to narrowing those divides and bringing about change, and hopefully leave you inspired to go back to your parts of the world to do much of the same.
Thank you very much, Armand, and thank you to you and the senior leadership team in Stellenbosch who are during a leadership transition period still prepared to take this on. And just a reminder for those of you who haven't taken part, the cohort's agenda is driven entirely by the participants, deans and directors, and the delegates that they involve as learning partners would typically apply by highlighting what keeps them awake at night, what they've learned that can benefit others, what they'd like some support with, and what they think a cohort as a collective can do. So there's a strong emphasis on learning and collective action. Moving on from that, I'm going to hand over to Darija from Oikos, and before I do, we do have a breakout that we wanted to run after this, but what I'm going to suggest, Darija, is that you give us an introduction. I'll fill in as and where I can, and that we have the discussion around the global agenda in the plenary, rather than doing breakouts again in the interest of time. So over to you, Darija.
This was actually a very co-creative process, but I'm going to take the honor of pitching it very quickly, even though I know that we are a bit behind with the agenda. Looking at the slide, I'm not actually going to talk a lot to the history or the roots. I think I would not do the justice of talking about roots because I actually haven't been part of the GRLI network so far behind, but I gained a lot of knowledge and experience around the history through John, Anders, and Matthew Wood. But I wanted to very briefly address how we kickstarted the process around the global agenda for responsible management education, and the fact that the transition or transformation in the business and management education is inevitable, and the depth of shift when it comes to the narrative is in question right now. So what we put into the center within the conversation between the strategic partners of GRLI Oikos, CFMD, AACSB, together with GRLI, was how can we harness and what are the opportunities of harnessing the healthy competition alongside fearless collaboration? So how can we shift the narrative from a growing ecosystem in the landscape of initiatives, networks, different NGOs, foundations that are working in the field of shifting, transforming responsible management education towards higher collaboration? And at June 2023 board meeting, we accepted and agreed that we will start co-developing or co-creating this global agenda for RME. And I think John already disseminated a little bit the initial invitation throughout the different networks. And I'm happy to pass it on to John, maybe to talk to you a bit about also the objectives, because purposefully or intentively we made it very high level or very broad and wide, since we want actually to invite different stakeholders into co-creating this agenda. John, do you want to talk a bit to that?
Yes, absolutely. And Darija, thank you very much for setting the scene on this. And I think we've also learned a huge amount from Oikos and what you're doing across student networks with SOS International and the likes. It's absolutely critical to have your support and endorsement and leadership really on this. I'll just put up, firstly, I've added the link to the chat for those of you who have not had a chance to look at the wording of this invite. Just to complement what Darija has said and to maybe add to this, we are really trying to create a snowball effect here, where we issue an invite that's got high-level objectives around setting an agenda for responsible management education without setting the agenda up front. So if you look at the objectives, they should come across as fairly high level, as aspirational. And the invite is, as we grow the number of co-convening networks and initiatives, that those networks and initiatives will add their own flavor and enrich this invite up to a point where we start co-creating a global agenda. Now, we've spoken about a number of things already during this AGM, including things like establishing regional activation gateways, finding existing platforms to enact some of the GRLI's work. And I think what this global agenda is trying to do is really to provide visible stewardship of GRLI's ways of working, but beyond our logo, to quote leadership. Leadership talks about beyond our ego, right? But this is to work beyond our logo. And what we're looking for, I think, at this stage is to think about the actual invite and its objectives as a partnership, to think about how we facilitate this process going forward and ensuring that it's inclusive and diverse enough. And also, what are those agenda items that needs to be prioritized? And so we don't have time for a breakout at this stage. So I'm going to suggest that we keep it in here. And I'll just put my screen on again, just so that you can have a quick look at what we're proposing. Let me just put that on. As Darija pointed out, the opening question is, what are the possibilities of harnessing healthy competition alongside fearless collaboration in order to advance and realize management education that is globally responsible, with a focus on the actual invite and its objectives, the facilitation process, and the agenda items. And those are just suggested focus areas. I think what we're inviting here really is an open conversation on the idea. We will, of course, take this also into the board meeting later today. But I'm going to mute myself and see if anyone is prepared to kick off a conversation and maybe share some immediate thoughts on on how we take this forward.
So having tried this and also together with John Knights, I think I'm struggling with the notion beyond the logo, because as in the conversation with Anders on the chat, I'm part of many initiatives which seem to try exactly what you described, John. And I think in principle, in Darija, I think that's exactly what we need, right? We need what Henry Mintzberg talks about in bringing the plural sector together, shaping this movement across the movements so we can scale impact, right? But in practice, that's extremely difficult. And I think this notion of no logo or beyond the logo is very dangerous, because in most of the initiatives that I see where lots of others participate and different communities come together, they actually in the end stick to their own logo. And every single person has a slightly, then there's Otto Sharma with Theory U, and then there's IDG with the IDGs, and then there's a sustainability person, and here's another one against greenwashing, and then there come the people against colonialism, and somehow it becomes very diverse, but the scalability of actually creating shared impact is very quickly going away. And I haven't got a recipe for this, but I just want to say, I think this no logo thing, I think this is where, and John, you and I discussed this in past meetings, right? So how much diversity and collaboration, co-creation is there is good, because otherwise people won't join. But where do we draw some boundaries? Where are some fundamental principles that everybody who wants to come along needs to agree on to, and how broad or strict are those? I think that's for me is a critical question. I'm saying this because it's part of what we try to do for the last 2 years, and it's really hard. On this competition versus collaboration, I was thinking that maybe what John talked about earlier in terms of the creating a course, creating the, John, I've forgotten, John Knights, what you call it, Collaboratory?
Collaboratory, yes. That's a John North word.
That's a John North word, so both Johns, right? A John squared. This kind of creating something together which is concrete and practical.
It's a
right? So focusing on a template that can be broad, that can be used in business schools, and then competition on how to do that and so on. But I think something very concrete, that for me would be the vehicle, because otherwise you will probably spend a lot of time on just talking and figuring out where everybody is. Here, stop.
Just a quick comment on that. Collaboratory is a concept as well. Yes. And it's pretty well developed. And that's definitely basically what's going to underlie the way that we are going to join together and work. You can add to that, John North.
Oh yeah, sure. No, thanks, Otti, for that. Yeah, I certainly can't take the credit for coming up with Collaboratory, but it's the collaborative laboratory, right, which we described in 50+20, and which has been quite foundational to a number of initiatives. So, JC.
Yeah, quick, because it's really a topic that we discussed for a long time, and I think it's absolutely key, and probably there is no one solution. The one idea, it's also how can we put collaboration into the way how we measure performance of the organization. All the work that we are doing in GRLI, for instance, it's time that we are paid by our own organization to give something, and it's recognized nowhere. A couple of years ago, there was one ranking in France called L'Étudiant, and they tried to do something intelligent. They tried to do a kind of sustainable ranking, the THQS, but at the end, they asked a question which was, except yourself, who has done some great thing today? Who gave you the more? And I think we should try, there is a way, I don't know, but there is probably a way to change the way how we compete. How can we compete to give, the winner will be the one who give the more. And I understand what you say about the no logo, etc. And it's always a thin line. Again, take task and Solitest. I forgot that. But it's always a thin line when you actually, you believe you spend lots of energy in your own project. So you believe it's great, even if you believe that you are not alone. So bringing in the assessment, the way how we measure that this organization gives something could be at least something that we can discuss. Ranking accreditation could be probably one of the places where we can put that.
Just a brief reflection that reminded me of is it's been more than 10 years since the 50+20 vision was published, and we know that if we were to go back and look at the 3 roles in the central collaboratory that the 50+20 vision described, at this stage, it's still relevant, I would argue, but it's going to be very difficult to find a business school that can truly say they live up to it. Okay, so this is quite evidently a journey. This is making the kind of changes that we're advocating is not necessarily easy. And the way in which we go about doing that, in other words, do we try and work behind the scenes, beyond the logo, etc., is part, I think, of that learning. Really valid points there, JC. I know that if you're mentioning the French example, but the positive impact rating is something that grew out of a question that the GRLI asked. Okay, so I would argue we're working beyond the logo there, because we're not steering the positive impact rating. I know a number of you are involved in that, but I can point you to the webinar where the seed was planted. And I think that's really, if we think about the next step of evolution of the GRI, especially towards 2030, this may be a question of whether the GRI acts as the catalyst for some sort of global collaboratory across management educators, where instead of establishing silos and additional networks, we actually ensure that there is true and deep collaboration on creating impact. And that may consume us in the process. I'm going to be as bold and say that, but I think it's absolutely crucial for us to consider this. Any closing thoughts just around the global agenda for responsible management education, because I'm conscious of the fact that we're coming up to the hour, and we would like to capture in the chat just your closing thoughts and words of encouragement around what to do next. But let me just hear if there are any final thoughts around the agenda that's proposed.
I want to just very briefly, one sentence, to react and reflect to what Oti shared, because I do resonate a lot that it's a huge challenge. And at the same time, how do we make a first step when it's a complex and a huge challenge? So would this be at least a first step? I always try to, and a question that inspired me in the last couple of weeks when I also had a flagship event together with Copernicus Alliance, SOS International, Club of Our Own Green Office Movement, in the Higher Education Summit. What would you do with 1% more courage? What would be the step, and what would be something that you would do with just 1% more courage? And potentially this is this one step that I personally could do in shifting the mindset towards rather collaboration and more collaboration than competition, because there needs to have a shift of a mindset needs to happen, so we couldn't think about beyond the logos, and that doesn't come by one sentence or one invitation. It comes as
Yeah. Thank you very much, Darija, for that. Well, I can see some of the board members that are arriving back from various locations and duties are starting to arrive into the meeting room. And I'm really encouraged by the richness and the depth of conversation we had today at the AGM. I know that some of you need to go. And so we're going to just close this meeting and reopen the Zoom room in 5 minutes so that I can end the recording and start a new recording. But as you exit the room, please just paste into the chat one word or phrase that you want to leave with us, so that we can also take that into the board meeting and into next year. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time, and to all our partners and associates and the governance structures for holding this work.
Thanks, everybody, and in particular, John.
Thanks, Peter. Nick, I'm going to have to look that one up, but thank you very much.